I'm writing you
Well,
a
now,
letter,
really, when we go back then to falling in
dear
love
suicide,
and say it's
dear
crazy,
suicide,
falling.
dear suicide,
See,
dear
we don't say
suicide.
rising
I'm
into
writing
love.
you a letter.
There is in it the idea of the fall. And it goes back, as a matter of fact, to extremely fundamental things. That there is always a
Dear
curious
suicide, dear suicide.
tie
I'm writing you a letter, dear suicide, dear suicide, dear suicide, dear suicide. I'm writing you a letter, dear suicide. I'm writing you a letter, dear suicide, dear suicide, dear suicide, dear suicide, dear suicide. I'm writing you a letter, dear suicide. I'm not doing so better, dear suicide. I'm down on my knees, dear suicide. I'm asking you to stop, please, dear suicide. The pain is too heavy, dear suicide. I'm feeling like I'm ready, dear suicide. I'm looking in the sky, dear suicide. I'm thanking you for letting me die, dear suicide. The pain is so real, dear suicide. I'm picking up the steel, dear suicide. I'm going to my veins, dear suicide. You driving me insane, dear suicide. I'm writing you a letter, 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 dear suicide. My life not really not dope, dear suicide. I'm really wanting to grab on the rope, dear suicide. My life is all over, dear suicide. The pain is like a motherfucking boulder, dear suicide. The pain is so cold, suicide. Why the fuck I'm smoking them zones, dear suicide? Every night I'm on the cry, dear suicide. Every motherfucker want to lie, dear suicide. I don't know who to trust, dear suicide. Every nigga want to fucking bust. Just haters in my face, demons in my space. Now suicide, I'm feeling like I'm losing the race, dear suicide. I'm writing you a letter, dear suicide. I'm writing you a letter, dear suicide. I'm writing you a letter, dear suicide, dear suicide, dear suicide. I'm writing you a letter, dear suicide. I'm writing you a letter, dear suicide, dear suicide, dear suicide, dear suicide, dear suicide, dear suicide, dear suicide. I'm writing you a letter, dear suicide. I'm writing you a letter.